Scenic Hotel Group, a place to stay no matter your staycation. From the Legacy Collection for those special occasions to Heartland Hotels with room for the whole whānau. Find your place to stay at scenichotelgroup.co.nz.
The 2023 Six Nations underway this weekend. Round 1, Wales v Ireland in Cardiff, 3:15 tomorrow morning. Then England against Scotland at Twickenham, 5:45 tomorrow morning New Zealand time. And Italy up against France in Rome from 4 a.m. on Monday morning. Let's bring in James Burridge from the BBC. James, thanks for joining us on Weekend Sport. How much more or perhaps maybe how much less significant is the 2023 Six Nations rugby competition, given that we are at the start of a World Cup year?
I think this is the most keenly anticipated Six Nations in a long time. I think they always are when you're in a World Cup year. And particularly this year because Italy, we're not talking about Italy as should they be in this tournament anymore? Should it be Georgia? Should South Africa be brought into the equation? There really is a sense that Italy could produce some magic again. And I know all the talk is about the coaches returning, but this is generally a tournament about 6 countries this time, and it hasn't always been like that. All
right, well, that's interesting because I had Italy at the bottom of my list of questions. You've moved them up to the top. Are they not going to be 6th? Are they not going to be 6th?
I love keeping you on your toes. I love keeping you on your toes.
Are they not going to be 6th?
They probably will be 6th. I tell you what, let's do this chat in about 3 months' time, and then I'll come back. It'll come back to bite me on the rear end, wouldn't it? All I'm saying is that Italy deserve the recognition for what they've done in the last 12 months under Kieran Curley, because they backed it up with a win against Australia, which nobody saw coming. So, it's not going to be straightforward for Italy. Of course it's not. But they've got some flying players in Caporotto, and that was one of the moments that basically was one of the death nails in Wayne Pivac's, tenure as Wales coach. But come tomorrow, I think as opening weekends go, it's pretty bloody awesome. I mean, it's Wales against Ireland under a closed roof in a banging Cardiff. And then it's England-Scotland at Twickenham. 2 absolutely fabulous games.
Can we go to England then? As you say, coaching changes. How different do you expect England to be under Steve Borthwick compared to the way they were under Eddie Jones?
You just want England as a neutral to be uncluttered. There was a real lack of identity about England, a confusion about England. But I tell you what's been really refreshing about England this week. We don't know how they're going to play and whether the baggage is still there. But what's great about Borthwick is, for him and the tone he's setting, is it's all about this weekend. And that is all it is. It's not about World Cup. I said before, Eddie Jones, if he'd been still on the job with England, would have let off so many grenades already, probably about the Scots. He would have backed up some of his players. He would have had a go at the media. He would have blamed the weather. And Borthwick is just keeping it very calm, very straight. He's picking players on form, which is so refreshing to see. He's not picked Tuolangi in the 23. That's a big call, but I think it's the right call. And he's allowing the players just to go and express themselves and play to their strengths. He's gone up to each and every one of them and said, I want you to do for your country what you do for your club really well. And it's just a change in tone. It's a change in culture. And we all know that when new coaches come in, there's a kind of a reaction, isn't there? There's a change in the atmosphere and there's often an uplift. And I think with Borthwick, Steve Borthwick, when I used to interview him as a club coach, he was hard work. Steve was a lovely, lovely guy, off mic, absolutely top guy. When you interviewed him, he was hard work. Since he's taken over as England head coach, there is an emotion about Steve Borthwick. There is a real passion. There's a genuine sense of this really matters. I want my country to win. And it comes across really well.
Coaching change in the Welsh team as well, as you mentioned. Wayne Pivac gone, Warren Gatland back at the helm. Last 4 years, James, Wales have been first, and fifth. What do you predict for them this time?
Well, funnier things have happened. If you're Ireland, Wales actually have quite a good record against the Irish. And it's, you look at that Welsh team and there are a lot of old faces in there that Gatland's turned to, and that's one of his biggest conundrums, is how he tries to reignite Wales in terms of style, but selection too. There are some familiar faces. Falatau, Alan Wynne is in there. Bigger's going to lead the line from 10. Liam Williams has come in for Halfpenny. Halfpenny was injured, but the fact that he named Halfpenny to start with made you think he was still 5 years ago. Gatland just has an ability just to create something special, doesn't he? Welsh rugby is going through a really torrid time off the pitch at the moment for a variety of reasons. But Gatland in one game will be able to he'll be able to reignite, re-inspire that Welsh team. And Cardiff, oh my God, it's got to be on the bucket list. You have to watch Wales in Cardiff in a Six Nations match because it's positively a bouncing place to play. That said, I reckon the Irish will starve them of possession, and it's a big test of that Welsh defence. Can they keep Ireland out for 60, 70 minutes? Because Ireland will love to play with the ball, suffocate the Welsh, and not give them any cheap scores.
Well, let's talk about Ireland. I don't know if you know this. They came down here last year and beat the All Blacks in a series. I'm not sure whether you were across that or not. Second in the Six Nations last year. Could this be Ireland's year?
I think if you're Andy Farrell and you're trying to find a target, an ambition, they didn't win the Six Nations last year. They're number one at the moment for a reason, but they have to win the Slam or the title this year because they've always peaked between tournaments. And actually, if you look at the run they've got some of the biggest games at home. They've got France at home. They've got England at home. Last game. That could be an immense match, by the way. If England get on a run and Ireland get on a run, then you've got a Grand Slam decider in Dublin to round the series off. But that's a challenge I think Andy Farrell has to lay down to his team, because if we want to take them seriously in a World Cup year, they've kind of got to back it up now. It's now or never, because France did it last year and got the Grand Slam. Can Ireland say, okay, we saw what you did, France, now it's our turn? And I think that has been the spanner in the works. Remember Joe Schmidt? And remember when England went and completely blew Ireland away in that Six Nations in 2019. And that was the moment when you just sensed the bubble had burst in Irish rugby. They're playing some great rugby. England completely blew them away, and it completely sacked their confidence for the rest of that year. So this is why I think for Ireland, this Six Nations is huge.
Johnny Sexton is so important to them, isn't he, James? Is he? What's he now? 37. He's kind of held together with a bit of sticky tape sometimes, but he's
about 59 now, isn't he?
I think so. You're probably right. But
he's battered and bruised and stitched up. It's remarkable the guy's still playing. He's just come back from another facial injury. But you're right. He's critical, absolutely critical. Joey Carberry, whoever they put in, if he gets injured to come through. The guy is he's a total warrior. Actually, what's really interesting is that him and Farrell are actually, they're real competitors. They love playing the game hard and fast. They like telling their team how they want things to play. They set the highest standard. But the interesting thing, I think, if you compare Farrell and Sexton, is that if you take Sexton out of Ireland, you worry about what happens next. And I just don't know if the same applies to Farrell in England anymore, because Marcus Smith, the young pretender to the crown, he's got this ability to create something out of nothing. Farrell sets ridiculously high standards, but he hasn't been at his best for the last few years, whereas Johnny Sexton, he's the linchpin of that Ireland team.
France have won 13 straight games. They were unbeaten in the Six Nations last year. They're many pundits' favourites for the World Cup. How much will their form in the Six Nations instruct us on their World Cup credentials?
I think France need to back it up. And I think the really interesting thing for France is they managed to just about get through during the autumn. They could have lost a number of those matches. The finish in some of those games was kind of gobsmacking. It was, the South Africa game was brutal, and they came through that one. And I look back at France now and I think they've got some tricky games. Ireland away is not going to be a straightforward one for them at all. They could lose that. England have got them at home. So this is a tough run for France. But again, it's a question of mettle and a question of where they want to set themselves. The beauty is every team comes into this tournament thinking they're going to win it, thinking they're playing really, really well. And actually, the key metric, if you like, in the Six Nations is momentum. Because if you lose your first one, first two games, then suddenly your confidence just completely ebbs away. And France have got swagger, they've got belief, they've got a crowd with them now, which is just, I talk about how exciting it is to commentate on games in Cardiff. Actually, the France World Cup will be extraordinary because they have forged this bond now between the union, the clubs, and the crowd, and the three of them to come together in a World Cup year. And they are the 16th man in many ways, that crowd, and that is what will ignite the French when things get tough. There have been games in the past at the Stade de France when the French were flogging. They were out on their feet. They were getting players sent off, and the crowd would turn on them. That doesn't happen anymore. And that's one thing that will certainly propel France.
All right, in Scotland, we better not forget our Scottish listeners. Fourth the last 3 years. Any chance, James, they could threaten the big three, or are they going to be sort of fourth again?
Who knows? It's going to be a really interesting one for Scotland. I don't think they fear England tomorrow. They've had a great run, and there have been some really interesting choices by Gregor Townsend. This could be his last Six Nations as coach. He's made some interesting calls with WP now coming into the pack. He's got Ben White in for Ali Price at 9. Finn Russell, we're really waiting to see if Finn Russell can produce magic once again. Jamie Ritchie skippering from the back row. And Tui Tulopu in the centres is going to be a fascinating one with Hugh Jones. So there's some real excitement about this Scotland team. But I talked about momentum for sides. It's absolutely critical for Scotland. If they're going to have any impact in this tournament, they've been accused in the past, and I think quite fairly, that, okay, you can beat England, that's great, that's a big win, but they never seem to back it up. So if there is a kind of an aim and ambition for Scotland and for Townsend, it's to say, right, play brilliantly, play like you mean it, but play it more than once. And that's a big challenge for Scotland. They certainly don't fear England tomorrow.
Highly anticipated Six Nations, as you say, James. Thanks so much for previewing it for our New Zealand listeners. We'll watch with interest from 12,000 miles away and look forward to catching up again soon.
Can't wait. Thanks again.